Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Bucket Think Tank, and we're going to talk about the Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, Part 2, Master of the Mississippi. So, like we did last time, we're going to talk about Scrooge's origin, like we did with the other one, and we're going to compare it to how the Life and Times works in comparison to the 87 version of the cartoon, and if it's mentioned at all in the 2017 version. Fortunately, this is still not mentioned in the 2017 version yet. So, the Master of the Mississippi story and how it relates to Once Upon a Time is actually, I think, one of the bigger contrasts, bigger differences of how these two origin stories work. Namely, in the fact that the Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck sort of takes a role of the hero's journey in some aspect. You could argue the first part is, somewhat of humble origins, being presented upon with an item which inspires them. Then there's a call to adventure, and so on. And then part two, the Master of the Mississippi, would be the crossing of the Rubicon, so to speak, or it's Frodo entering the Prancing Pony, Luke entering the Cantina Bar, those sorts of fun things. In the 87 cartoon, it's all sort of streamlined. So here in the 87 version, Scrooge comes to America. He's arrested primarily for wearing what they call a skirt, but it's his kilt, and he meets the Beagle Boys there for the first time. And the Beagle Boys here are just sort of introduced for the sake of being introduced, I think, because it's pretty short. They're just antagonists, and they often feel like the same Beagle Boys will meet in the present day of the 87 cartoon, which is a bit weird. But besides that, once Scrooge meets his Uncle Catfish, he's only called Catfish, which is always the weird thing to me. Uncle Catfish is not someone with a riverboat or anywhere near a successful captain. He's a guy on a broken riverboat. Looks like something out of the Rescuers, Aunt Medusa's ship that she lives on, and he's having trouble with this riverboat race against a frog, and I forget the frog's name because the frog's name doesn't really matter. And Scrooge helps his uncle win the race against the frog, and effectively he wins by thinking outside the box, working smarter, not harder, as his father said, and then his uncle sort of like lowballs him on payment, and so on and so forth. And that's kind of it. It actually is it for that part of the story. And that's sort of what I don't like about this episode, Once Upon a Time, is because it sort of undercuts everything. Throughout the rest of this, you're going to see Scrooge pretty much solo. Like there's no real interaction with people, no one who helps shape him. Now, coming up to the Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck story, this is actually pretty interesting because it builds things on a much grander scale. So Scrooge arrives in the Mississippi, effectively, and he gets off the boat. He's looking for his uncle. He's given directions while getting his bag stolen by a shark. Just a crafty guy, and he walks past a man who looks a lot like Gyro Gearloose. But we'll come back to that. When he gets inside the hall, he sees his uncle playing cards against a man named Horseshoe Hog. Now, this is important because Horseshoe Hog and his uncle Pothole have always been sort of antagonists. They race every now and then. As a matter of fact, for the wager that Horseshoe Hog makes, which is, hey, I'm going to put my boat up, put up something else to match it, and Uncle Pothole says, my own boat sank in that race we had a few years ago. And we'll see that repeated later in the Great Boat Race of the Uncle Scrooge comic. And Pothole offers, like, you know what? I will offer the location and the rights to a riverboat that sank, the Dren-White, which was this really grand ship about 30 years ago that was carrying a large shipment of government gold. Pothole was the only survivor. He's the only one that knows where it is. So they make the wager. Pothole wins. He says, "Come with me, kid. You brought me luck." Then they meet, and this is important because this is creating a much more interesting relationship. With Uncle Catfish, it was very much help me with this, and that's sort of it. What we're going to see with Scrooge's relationship with his Uncle Pothole here is that they will learn from each other, or rather, Scrooge will learn from his uncle. So on the new boat, the Dilly Dollar, Pothole says, "Well, I can't get to the boat. I can't get to the boat because not only is it sank, but the Mississippi is so dirty." As Pothole says, "I've seen dust blow off the surface and catfish come up to sneeze." And Scrooge mentions that he saw a guy earlier that sells pellets that can clarify water. And so Pothole says, okay, that's what we need. We'll go there, and I will go. We're gonna go find it right there at Monkey's Eyebrow. And then he sees inside is Horseshoe Hog. He was eavesdropping, or rather, he was just clearing out his stuff. So with this information, the Horseshoe goes to recruit some help, and he comes across Blackheart, the pirate Blackheart. And you'll know who he is, you know who they are the second you see them. But we're going to hold off on that. And you should probably guess who they are, especially as the story goes on. So Scrooge and his uncle go off to meet the person who's selling the pellets, and his name is Ratchet Gearloose. He's Gyro's father. And that was so awesome to me when I read this the first time. I'm like, oh, cool. Although the first time I read it, I thought it was Gyro. So, but anyway, he's been ambushed by Horseshoe Hog's men, or aka Blackheart's boys, and they realize that, they have to go find him. They have to go get the boat, and they have to go track him down. And they have a couple of short altercations with him. These altercations just sort of help to show you the kind of adventure we're going at here, but also certain things we're going to find out going on that will shape Scrooge in the future. One thing is, Pothole agrees to pay them 30 cents a day. Now, Scrooge takes his heart like, he's paying his own family member 30 cents a day. Frugal. And this is important because in the comic books, Scrooge only pays his nephews, Donald, Huey, and Louie, 30 cents an hour. So we see where that came from. And then over the course of this adventure, we're seeing Pothole train Scrooge how to measure the currents, how to sail effectively on the riverboat. And when they come across the Beagles Blackheart for the first time, the second to last time, it's when Horseshoe has them ram the Dilly Dollar and it crashes, and it's a total wreck. And the Blackheart and his boys throw Horseshoe Hog off the riverboat, and in his anger at being, cheated by Blackheart, and at the fact that Pothole keeps laughing, he drops him down a well. And when Scrooge goes to get him, he says, "No, don't bring. I'm not climbing up. You come down here and bring a torch and some rope." And it turns out that when the Dren-White sank, there was this flood a couple years ago, and it moved the river aside. So it turns out that the Dren-White isn't underneath the river. As a matter of fact, it's underneath a farm, effectively. And so they go through, Pothole and Scrooge go through the remains of it, and there's all this silt underneath it. So it's pretty dangerous stuff. It's almost like you're racing against the clock before the whole place comes tumbling down eventually. And they find the safe containing the government gold, and Pothole is super happy, but Scrooge is a bit off-put. And there was some complaints that this felt a bit out of character for Scrooge, but I think we're forgetting he's, at most, still 14 or something. And he has his own ideas as to how adventures go, what it means to become rich through your own hard work and determination to just find treasure. This is technically his first treasure hunt. And it doesn't feel right to him. So Pothole's like, look, it'll be fine. Look, what matters is we've got it, so let's go. And then they are accosted by Blackheart's boys. And they take the gold, tie Pothole and Scrooge up, and they get ready to go on the River Witch, which is the boat that Horseshoe Hog still had. And Scrooge lets it slip that there's another treasure Pothole told them about. And so Blackheart has his boys try to, interrogate Pothole, by tormenting Scrooge. And Scrooge says, no. And Pothole's like, I don't know what he's talking about. And Scrooge eventually breaks down, and he effectively tricks Blackheart into meeting up with the government again. And that was cool because in that moment, when the government boys are talking to Blackheart and his crew, he's like, well, no, nothing to see here. Scrooge grabs the mask off and says, no, these are the terrible Beagle boys. And that's how they got their name. Blackheart gets the name Beagle Boys from Scrooge. So this is what makes it fun, because in the 87 version, they're already the Beagle Boys. They already have this mythos about them. Here, they are criminals still. They're thugs, but they don't have a brand yet. And a good portion of this book from the Beagle Boys, them trying to find a name like the Masked Marauders and so on and so forth. But the Beagle Boys is what sticks. So the Beagle Boys get arrested, and Pothole says, well, the government may have taken the gold back, but we got a nice reward for arresting the Beagle Boys. and he wants to give some to Scrooge, but he needs every cent to repair the dilly dollar. So he says, like, you know what? Stay on as my apprentice, and I'll sell you the dilly dollar cheap when I retire in a few years. And that's the agreement. And so Scrooge, Pothole, and Ratchet Gailus decide to go get something to drink to celebrate their accomplishment. Their first real adventure, their day's labor. And Scrooge doesn't want to spend his money. He sort of looks at his coin and says, like, you know what? I think the memory and the story behind this coin is more interesting than anything else I can buy with it. I'll keep it. And Pothole sort of makes a joke like, money is for spending. What are you doing? What are you going to do? Like, keep a whole coal bin full of that stuff? And Scrooge is sort of like, huh, a coal bin full of money, huh? So time passes, and Scrooge is trained by Pothole and is sold the dilly dollar for a relatively cheap price. And this is sort of where something interesting happens, because Scrooge didn't make his money on the riverboat. It'll be many years before he does make any real money that he's going to be able to hold on to. So what happened? Well, history happened. So by the time Scrooge gets his riverboat, his own personal riverboat, his own riverboat captain, the railroads have come in. They've come in full force, and it's getting harder and harder for him to, make a living as a riverboat captain. This is historically relevant because that's how Cornelius Vanderbilt made his money. He made his money with the riverboats, and then he sold it, seeing ahead that the railroads would just totally wreck the riverboat industry, and so he got a jump on that competition, and that's how he made his fortune the second time. He was actually worth way more than he was before. This is what Pothole does with the importance of business sense. He saw that the riverboat industry was dying. He heard about the railroads, rumors going on, like, you know what, best to get out. Or at least that's how you can interpret it. So Scrooge is a riverboat captain. Ratchet Gear Loose is still working, making repairs and whatnot. And while transporting some more government gold, because this is what Scrooge does now, it's actually possibly the only job you can get as a riverboat captain at this time, he is then jumped by the Beagle Boys again, under the guise of free firewood, which is always good if you're a riverboat captain. And they take the gold, and they lock Scrooge and Ratchet Gear Loose in the boiler room, where they totally wreck another boiler that will explode and kill them all. But Ratchet's like, hold on, I've got an idea. Get this other boiler, put this cotton in here, put this other stuff in, and watch out for the custard pie I was making. And they just get in there, and their whole purpose is just like, hopefully use the boiler here to endure the explosion of the other boiler. And the boiler explodes. It's huge. It's epic. And it destroys the shack that the Beagle Boys were in as they bring the gold to their dad, Blackheart Beagle. And Scrooge and Ratchet Gear Loose have been blown up to the top of a clock tower or bell tower. And as the Beagle Boys have been pushed by the explosion into town, right next to the sheriff's office, they're all set to get away, like walk right by the sheriff. Scrooge like, hold on, arrest those men for pirating, attempted murder, impersonating a woman, and theft of government gold. And it's like, it'll take more than blowing up a riverboat with me inside to take me out. And that effectively ends Scrooge's career as a riverboat captain. And the Beagle Boys laugh, like, he'll never make anything of himself, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, we get to relax in jails, be nice and cool, and whatnot. And this is true. Scrooge's riverboat career has effectively ended. Ratchet Gear Loose has decided that, he's going to open a custard pie shop, and I don't think we'll ever see him again, which is a bit sad, because I don't think Gyro mentions him in any of the other books. Scrooge resolves to, head west. He goes to get a job, shoveling coal into, for trains, and he's just reading his uncle's dime novels, and that's sort of it. What I liked about Mash of the Mississippi, and it's honestly not one of my favorites, is Uncle Pothole for the most part, and how the Beagle Boys come into being. Scrooge is sort of he's a second fiddle in this story, even a third fiddle, if you put Angus, Pothole, and the Beagle Boys as the first and second fiddle, respectively, because that's a lot of lore being established here in the Duck universe, as well as Gyro. Scrooge here is just sort of examining the world, and it's one of the few times it happens in this series. Every other time it'll be Scrooge taking point, but again, what's important is this mentor figure. So in the first part, it was his father, who was secretly pushing Scrooge towards greatness, manipulating events and whatnot in the form of the number one dime, and Sir Quackley, who as a ghost and convinced him to go to America, or rather guided him to decide to go to America. Here we have someone actively teaching Scrooge that's how to be a riverboat captain. And even if he can't do it anymore, like let alone for financial gain, we still see that it's a lesson he's learned and it's experience he's gained, which is the purpose of all these lessons he's going to learn until finally he'll be at the height of his powers, which hasn't happened yet. It would have been very easy for us to say, okay, and this is how he made his money. Like, no. Life is going to be of a lot more failures and setbacks than I think most of us ever really prepared for. And here, Scrooge, after hitting the failure of not only a struggling riverboat business, but then losing his riverboat, just says, well, I guess I'll start over again. And that's awesome, as opposed to Scrooge being effectively cheated by his Uncle Catfish in the 87 version. But with that in mind, we're going to bring this video to a close here. If you like this video, feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It really does help. Feel free to check out some of my other videos. Leave your thoughts down, especially if you read this, in case something I missed. And I will catch you all later. This is the Debunking Think Tank signing out. May your fandom serve you well.